Yo, what up, guys? It's me again. It's been a while. I decided to take a little break from this, and now I'm back to make guides for you guys if you need them. I hope you guys had a wonderful season. Last season, Unholy was really good, as predicted, so I'm sure there's a ton of new legends, maybe even Obsidian legends out there for Unholy. That's incredible. Congratulations. Oh, type in the comments below if you were one of those that got legend for the first time. I would love to hear about it in the comments. That's exciting. But yeah, congratulations. That's a huge achievement. And well done. You should feel proud of that. You could probably do it again this season, right? In season 3, because Unholy is once again extremely good. So let's talk about all the tools you need to be able to do that. As always, I'm going to do what I always do, which is talk too much for too long and give you every bit of info you could possibly do to build your character to have the most success in threes in a solo shuffle environment. Primarily. I mean, these setups would all work in twos too. I just never play that. I think threes and solo shuffle are probably what people want to succeed in the most anyway. So we'll start with itemization. That's gear. And the first thing on the list, of course, is stats. And that is so easy. It's going to be pretty quick. You get all the verse and more, actually, that you need from PvP gear. So you actually need to reduce versatility and put it all into haste and mastery. And the way to do that is, first off, by your tier set. You can see this piece has haste and mastery, no versatility on it. The second way is by crafting pieces at the work order place and then putting in a missive called Missive of Fever Flare and one of these trophies to make them as high item level as everything else. You can get them right from that. Look at this. Trophy of Conquest. These are chest legs, hand waist, and it makes it 489 item level, which is the max item level in PvP right now. So you craft a piece that allows you to customize the stats, and you customize it to be haste mastery with a Fever Flare missive, and then that's how you reduce verse. So I already have 2 set, haste and mastery. Haste and mastery. And you can see that lowers my verse. So now my verse is at 29.92%. It DRs at 30%. So I'm right underneath it, and that feels pretty good. If you get a full set of PvP gear with none of those crafted pieces or tier pieces, you'll be at like 37%, which is way over the DR of 30%. So it actually just becomes a much worse stat, and your output would suffer. While your survivability would probably be pretty decent, your output would suffer. So you try and get that versatility in PvP scaling down beneath 30%. You could even get it as low as 25% by crafting a bunch of pieces, and your output will feel very good. And I don't think your survivability will take much of a hit at all, especially with all the stam that you're getting from the new gear helping our death strikes and our necrotic wounds healing. I think our tankiness is actually pretty high. Now we could talk about that tier set real quick, because I'm sure everybody's going to ask. How did I get it? First of all, so the legs I got from getting 1600, and then you can use the token that it gives you to get a tier piece in Emerald Dream, just like you could last season. And then the shoulders I just bought and then converted. Yes, the converter is open first week for anybody that doesn't know. So I bought the shoulders and then converted them to tier piece. And absolutely, I do believe you'll run 2 set now. It's the first thing you should buy. I mean, I've already done it, so you should know my opinion on that, but I also do believe you will grab 4 set in the future. Now, you end up having to get a little worse stats. These are perfect stats, the shoulders and legs, so they're a no-brainer. You would just get them because they're BIS stats. But then you're going to have to get less than perfect stats, and I believe that you will grab the helmet. That's crit, but it's not main stat. Look at that. That's main stat mastery. That is a ton of mastery for you. And then you will grab the hands because that's haste first. I mean, no brainer, that's going to be good, right? So you don't lose too much. You only get a tiny bit of crit with main stat mastery, and then you get fantastic stats on your hands for a 4 set. Now, our 4 set's not as good as like Hunter or Feral, but when you have to sacrifice almost nothing and you end up getting a 4 set for free, yeah, it's going to amplify your damage. When you get your 4 set, the Magus is going to do some damage overall, and that's a no-brainer. So, what have we learned so far? Get the 4 set, those 4 pieces. Get these 2 pieces right now, legs and shoulders. And try and bring down your versatility with haste mastery on every other piece, except for a tiny bit of crit you're going to have to get on your helmet. But that's the only crit you'll have, because right now you can see I'm at 0. As for which stat you stack, neither. If you stack all in on one or the other, like everything is crafted to have mastery, everything is enchanted and gemmed to have mastery, you'll actually DR that stat too. I did do the math. You would actually DR it by a lot. So just get a combination of both. Haste gives you procs, Death Coil procs, which with Doom Burst, which we'll talk about soon, and of course all the sudden Doom related things. It makes your Death Coils do obscene damage for free, because they're free procs. And it also gives you faster globals and smooths out your rotation, and mastery just makes you do obscene damage. So why not both, right? That Road to El Dorado meme, both is good, right? So you just get a combination of both. You don't have to worry at all about the numbers for each one, because you're going to have a lot of both. Finally, and of course, I'm not going to skip this. I know everybody cares. Embellishments. So here, I already have one of those too, because if you turn in the quest you get from the first box, you get tokens that I was talking about before, and I upgraded my Infurious War Boots that give you a primary stat when you stun or kick somebody to 489. You can see 489 in PvP, and there's that Verse Mastery. Those are phenomenal stats. So of course we're going to use this embellishment again. It's just the easiest to work with and the most overall value. Then the second embellishment I'm going to use this season is Lariat. Last season I did the Haste Legs and the Undulating Spore Cloak, but Spore Cloak is nerfed, and Haste Legs, why would I do that when I have these tier legs that have perfect stats right here? So instead, we're going to go with the Lariat that a lot of people know about and have run. And I think it's just going to be overall useful. Now, you could run that Dream Helmet that people are talking about, but that's a helmet, if I recall. That's why they call it the Dream Helmet, at least Skeeter did in the DK Discord. And that is a problem, because if you don't get this head for your tier piece that has so much awesome mastery on it, you have to get this chest, right? Because you have to get 4 if you want to finish up your tier set. And that has main stack crit, which is clearly awful. So I'm going to go with the Lariat instead and use my helmet for tier. And that is everything for gear. Of course, you're still using Fallen Crusader Runeforge. I ended up going with Leech enchants and the Stam on boots instead of speed. And the reason is double DA seems to get me where I need to go, and I have 30-yard range Coil and Clawing, which ends up just doing all my damage at a range. And the Leech healing, especially when I just do so much damage because Unholy does. That's no problem. The Leech healing, though, if you're running the disease build, oh my goodness. And you have pets, oh my goodness. So you can actually heal for like 500k to even 1 million if it's a long game. And that's just supplementary healing for a pretty decently tanky spec with your extra health pools, necrotic wounds healing, death strike extra healing, even Will of the Forsaken, even though it's nerfed, is actually, or Will of the Necropolis, rather, is actually, I haven't looked at that talent so long because it got nerfed day 1. But it's actually decent now with our health pool. So I've seen it do a good portion of my healing, so. There you go. That's how you gear a character, right? Embellishments, stats, tier set, my thoughts on it. There's everything. No crit at all. That's the bottom line, of course. So now, of course, we have to get into the meat of what everybody's very curious about is probably talents, and you have every reason to be. I have some really good stuff for you this time around. I'm excited. If you skip to this section, good on you, because this is going to be a good section. I'm going to tell you everything about the talent builds, and the choice talents you can run right side and left side, and then the PvP talents, and you're good to go to win every game, which I believe in you to do. So I'm going to start with my Coil Clawing build for last season. I played this as Hunter DK to 27, and we barely pushed. That was in regular 3s. We barely pushed last season. I didn't get a lot of Qs in, and it just felt so good to have that much on-demand damage playing with the Hunter. You know, those stun trap goes, you want to do damage instantly in that CC window, and this build does it. So I think last season, it was actually probably my favorite build, even though I didn't see a lot of people running it. This season, no-brainer my favorite build, because all of those buttons that this build prioritizes, all got buffed. So what makes this build different? Well, you can see it, right? The regular Bursting Swords Clawing Shadows build just goes right down here. Gets Bursting Swords and then goes down. But unfortunately, you have to run Epidemic, Replenishing Wounds. Then you get Bursting Swords. That's amazing. And then Pestilence. So dead talent, amazing talent, dead talent. But is it worth getting 3 completely dead talents for 1 amazing talent? There's actually a few things you can do with those talents that give you a different type of really fun setup. And I've talked about this in the last guide, but if people are new, then I should talk about it again. So you get Dark Transformation and Dark Transformation, and then double Ghoulish Frenzy, which makes Dark Transformation increase the attack speed and damage of you and your pet by 10%. And that's where it all lies in, right? Dark Transformation itself is not that great because your pet doesn't do that much damage and it's nerfed in PvP. But have it being a 45-second cooldown and last much longer from Eternal Agony gives you this Ghoulish Frenzy buff more often, more frequently. And it just makes you do 10% more damage, which is more than a full stacked morbidity, by the way, because that could be 8% with Unholy Blight. But this is 10% during Dark Transform. But it also gives you attack speed, and with all the haste and Icy Talons, and then Ghoulish Frenzy on top of that, your attack speed starts getting really high, and that synergizes perfectly with all of these Death Coil proc talents, right? Sudden Doom, the free proc from attacks, then you get the Rotten Touch extra damage, but then you get Harbinger of Doom, which makes it trigger even more often. This is all multiplicative together, and increase your damage of Death Coil in addition to that, which then synergizes with Doom Burst, which gives you a ton of wound bursting, and that nice 90% slow, which does matter because then you don't have to press chains. You're actually only doing damage in globals. So this entire build, why I call it Coil/Clawing, is because that's what it works on. Even the Bursting Swords build does not do this much coil or clawing damage because you have an extra modifier they don't have, the 10% right here. But then you have an attack speed modifier that bundles with all the other attack speed modifiers, giving you more procs, which bursts more wounds and does more coil damage, right? So you can see the positive feedback loop there. It's absolutely incredible. And very good now that they've buffed those abilities even more. So the effective way you want to play this is just doing exactly what you would do with the Bursting Swords build. But every 45 seconds, you got to make sure to press that Dark Transform on cooldown. You want to pool up your Festering Wounds right before then. So you want to have like, okay, Dark Transform's coming up off cooldown. I'm going to have like 5-6 wounds on them. Something I generally don't recommend doing. I generally recommend you getting down to 0. But when you press it and you have enough haste on your gear, that's a big importance. So remember, get all that haste that you can get. You're going to feel it. Just play the build and take it into Solo Shuffle. I have gotten like proc. And it's just, that's 2 wounds, and 180k damage from Death Coil, 180k damage from Death Coil, because you have every mod in the game, including one that nobody's working with. That's 10% extra damage. When you hit something for 150k crit, and I know you've probably seen one by now because I have, that's an extra 15k damage on top of that, and your clawing that comes after, and both wounds that you just bursted, right? The other thing about this that you're going to probably notice is that this build doesn't have Magus or Short APOC. So Short APOC, for me, I don't really run that in any build, and the reason why is Doom Burst. I build a lot around the generating of Death Coil procs, of course, and I always run Harbinger, which gives you those procs more often, which gives you a ton of bursted wounds, right? If you can burst wounds with Death Coil at a range and burst wounds with Clawing Shadows at a range, then the value of APOC itself gets diminished, right? Now, APOC, you're like, what, dude? APOC bursts 4 wounds. It's such a good butt. Yeah, well, the way you burst a wound, let's say I burst a wound, 2 wounds with Coil, and then burst 2 wounds with Coil again. That's 4 wounds and 2 coils that are both buffed by Harbinger of Doom, because the only way they burst wounds is if you have a proc, which means you have Harbinger of Doom, right? That's coil damage plus wounds, coil damage plus wounds. That's actually arguably much better than APOC plus wounds, because APOC itself doesn't hit very hard. Death Coil hits 5-6 times harder than I'm talking about the APOC itself, right? The thing bursting the wounds. But Death Coil hits really hard and bursts the wounds, right? So I think it's a little bit right now of a fallacy to build fast apocalypse builds, because the value that you're getting out of it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense, right? You can already burst those wounds in a more efficient, high damage, ranged way with a 90% slow. And I know everybody's using Doom Burst, so they're already getting all that value. I think they're overthinking it by then also trying to get APOC wound burst when you just don't need it. So the reason I talk so much about that is because I know a lot of people are going to be like, wait a minute, I see every build in the game with Army of the Damned, whatever, right? And if you're not running Army of the Damned, then Magus lose a lot of value. Now, I understand the tier set synergizes with Magus, but, and I'm sure this has made rounds by now, when they nerfed the PvP tier set Magus, they nerfed our base Magus as well. It's 50%, right? 50% effectiveness in PvP. Go try it out yourself. And the damage, as a result, looks a little silly, because it seems like it's a high percentage of your damage, but that tier set makes it shoot those volleys out of 4 nearby enemies. So what you should do is look at your kill target and see how much did Magus contribute. Then cut that in half. well, not half, maybe you can take 2/3 of it, because you have one Magus from Army, then one Magus from an APOC, but then you have a Magus that you were going to get from your tier set. So by talenting into Magus of the Dead, it's only 60%, 66% of the Magus damage that you're actually doing is added by this talent, because the other one you're going to get regardless. And see how much that is done to your kill target. Because he's also firing shadow bolts off at pets and other people, and even maybe the healer at some point, right? He's just firing it off cleave. So it's not super useful to pad Magus shadow bolts that are 50% nerfed on pets, right? So take a look at how much. Do it yourself, you know? Do your own research kind of thing. Take a look at how much it's doing to just kill target, and then take that number and multiply it by 0.66. That's how much you got from Magus of the Dead. And I think it's very low, but it's much, much lower if you're not running Army of the Damned, which I already gave my reason for that. So this, sorry for taking so long, but I like to flesh out the reasoning behind it. Otherwise, you just have to believe me. I'd like to provide some information that's more concrete, right? That's the Coil Clawing build. What does it synergize? Not APOC, not Bursting Wounds, but yes, technically Bursting Wounds. You're just doing it in a different way. But your Coil damage and your Clawing. And it hits so... You're going to hit 170k with 2 wounds to like 50k, 50k, and then a Clawing for 120k. And then you're going to do it again with this second proc that you've stored up from all the extra procs you get on Ghoulish Frenzy. It's so fun. It's just extremely exciting to play this build. So that's the build. And of course, they're all going to be linked. So you could follow along with what I just said there by having it in your own talent tree. Yeah, and your execute power is so ridiculous. Reaping, 20% reaping with 2 Death Coil procs ends the game. I've killed somebody, right? And I'm sure you have too, from across the map. Because the Death Coil gets them into reaping range, and then the Clawing kills them with reaping buff. Yeah. Okay. So now, here's the standard swords build, because I'm not going to just like not go over this. Of course, it's still a good build. I'm just talking about the advantages to the other one. But you've all seen this, right? You have to go down these 3 dead talents, but then you get an amazing one where your wounds do 20% more damage, and they do a little bit of chip damage. Not that much, but the primary effect is so good. Then, because you're running Army of the Damned, and this will synergize with a 4 set better than it synergizes with a 2 set, you're going to run that Magus, and there's the standard build, right? You could, I guess, technically take these out and go into 1 Ghoulish Frenzy, maybe 2, but it's not that important now when you're not running the full Coil Clawing setup with Unholy Command and Eternal Agony, right? So, as a result, this is a very good, just standard build. You don't have to change anything from last season. It just got buffed in every way. So this prioritizes wound damage. Instead of it all coming from Coil Clawing, you can get it from Coil, Clawing, and APOC, right? Now you have those fast APOCs, you get a little Magus chunk damage in there every single time, and you just got big wound damage. It's still going to be good, and the cleave will even be naughty because the Magus itself cleaves and the Bursting Swords cleaves, so there you go. Just nothing really more to say. I talked about the other one for hours because I don't think I've seen too many people talk about it. But this one I think has been talked about to death. It's a good build. It worked all last season. It can work right now. Feel free if you're comfortable with that and it's working for you. Feel free to go full in to the Magus and the Bursting Swords. Okay, now finally, of course, disease. This one I have to show a few alterations on. So the disease build, of course, prioritizes using Plaguebringer and Even Fever. Virulent Plague actually got buffed this season as well. So Virulent Plague now doing a good chunk of your damage. And you get the Plaguebringer buff and the Even Fever buff to make it do significantly more. This just rots like crazy. You're going to be top of the meters all the time. But remember, it's a little... You don't have as much on-demand pressure because you're not running Clawing Shadows. And you are padding, for sure. You're padding like crazy. So it's going to look really good. And if you do kill hunter pets, they're going to hate you because then they have to keep reviving their pet all the time. Maybe even demo pets, right? You're going to cleave like absolute crazy if you get a melee cleave and you grip them all together and you just start rotting their whole team with another class that rots really well. Even DH, just unbelievable damage. Or Shadow Priest that's rotting, though I don't think it's as good right now. But Demo just has so many little chip damage, right? You could play this with Demo and they would be taking like 70,000 5k hits a second. It'd be impossible. Not obviously exactly that much, but it's a lot. So there's a lot of different ways you can run this right now. There's the Blight traditionally, right? Blight gives you another 2% on morbidity. So you're doing 8% damage every time you press morbidity, which is just good raw, every time you press Blight from morbidity, which is just good raw damage. And the damage from Blight isn't terrible too, especially since you're trying to pad as hard as humanly possible and kill every pet and every player. Unholy Blight just does that more. Now you got Defile, which gives you 8% mastery, but it's a little clunky, right? The damage output is very high. So again, if you're doing Grip Blind, you AoE stun people in it. Maybe you've got an AoE stun from your partner, or you're a War Stomping Cow. You can just keep people in the Defile for a little bit, and it gives you mastery, which is just going to amplify all of your Rot to new heights. And the Defile itself does damage, and then your Scourge Strike cleaves, and you want to press Scourge Strike for Plaguebringer and to burst wounds. So now you're bursting the wounds on everybody. It's a ton of just raw damage. And if you ever get like an Unholy DK and a Warrior and a Healer all stuck in a pile, maybe it's even a Fistweaver, and you're doing that go, you're going to actually just be doing 200k DPS. Like, you'll see it on the meters, and they'll even something that can pad heal might not even be able to pad heal through that. Maybe Fistweaver is a bad example because they might be able to do it, but on our Druid, forget about it. He can't, even all of his tree and Saudi, I don't think he can heal through all 3 of his players dying like that at the same time. But now Defile is clunky, right? So you could do something like this, okay? Now you have Reaping instead. That's just more value overall if you're not getting good Defile windows. But now you're thinking, wait a minute, you're still missing Army of the Damned and Magus, and he's going to cleave and has a lot of sustained damage, and that's what you're trying to make. Right, because I had Blight and Defile, which both do those things as well. Now you drop Defile, maybe instead of grabbing Reaping, you actually just go even more pad, right? So now you have fast APOC, you have fast Magus, and you have AoE Magus, of course. So you're just going to have now the same type of rot pressure from the diseases. Now you got the Eben Fever and the Plaguebringer still. So you've got that source of just raw, constant, never-ending damage. And then your Magus and your extra pets there, and the Frostbolt Slow is actually kind of nice, add to that. And you do it on a very short window, right, every 45 seconds. You could even add Bargain to this setup, and I see a lot of people, I don't think it's good. I think this is where you draw the line. I think the Army of the Dead ghouls do add a little bit of damage. Crypt Fever almost never does. The cooldown is only reduced by 15 seconds, so it's just a little quicker. I don't know if that's super valuable because, again, you have a ton of wound bursting from Doom Burst, and you lose a PvP talent. Strang right now, with all the damage in the game, this is just a 4-second CC instant that DRs with almost nothing, right? How many blanket silences are there in the game? Hunter, Shadow Priest, which we're not going to play with quite as much. I think Demo DK is back in a big way. They don't have a silence, right? Imagine, stun, blind, fear. And then they're like, finally, I can top you. Instant silence. Nope. With all the damage that you have, both on demand or sustain or pad or whatever, right? It's all damage, and it's taking their health bar to 0. So running Bargain, I think, is just a little bit excessive, but if you want to go full into the Magus dam with the most pad, feel free to try it out and see if you can get some Crypt Fever dam to show up. I think most of the time it's pretty low. Okay, so that was Coil Clawing, my favorite. The traditional Bursting Swords absolutely was good for a whole season, and you could run it now. And then the various variants of the disease build, right? You could run all into the disease aspect with the Unholy Blight, 8% morbidity, and even some Defile, or maybe Reaping. Or you could drop them both and go Magus, Army of the Damned. Whew. Okay, so those are the 3 big and the variants of the 3 big talents, trees, or builds rather, that will 100% get you to Legend and Beyond this season. I'm sure all 3 of them could. So have fun finding out which one works for you the best, and maybe even you find out some situations where one build is prio over another, and you use multiple builds over the course of the season. Like maybe you use the Coil Clawing against a Frost Mage with a Hunter on your team, and you just spike him down from 80% health, and you're like, oh my god, what did I just do to that guy? And then you swap over to the Disease build against Demos and Unholy DKs, pad off their pet, leech heal a lot, and kill their pet so they do less damage. See? You got choices, and you got situations those choices can matter. So fun. Okay, now we're going to go down and talk about the 3 PvP talents, because this is the easiest part of talents as a whole. Doomburst is your definitive spike damage, insane pressure, 90% slow, so it bakes in a slow into damage, which saves you a global, which in certain situations when they're kiting and you can just coil instead of having to coil chains, right? That's a 90% slow and like 400k damage if they're both procced coils, right? Insane. So Doomburst, everybody runs it. It's amazing. Necrotic Wounds, that's been a staple of expansion. So, excuse me, so you only have one choice node, right? Now, Necrotic Aura is nerfed. Bloodforged is interesting, and there's a lot of physical damage, but there's also a lot of hybrid magical damage, so it would be hard to get use out of this. And then Bargain we just talked about. So it's kind of like Strang is a staple too, but if you're playing a magic comp and you're playing into an Ardurid and you haven't gotten good Strang windows, you could play Necrotic Aura like Demo DK, SPDK. Or if you just cannot live versus this one kitty cleave or something, right? You could try Bloodforged Armor. If you really do like the triple reduction on APOC Magus, then you can use Necro Bargain like we talked about. And then if you want to Spell Warden your healer's traps and then you lose anyway in solo shuffle, you could run Spell Warden, right? Trust me, that's what's going to happen. Somehow you're going to feel like you made every play, but you would have actually just won by just doing the most damage in game. It's going to be so infuriating. You're going to be like, oh my god, I just got his next trap. And then you're going to lose later, and you're going to be so mad, so literally mad. Because honestly, just AMSing yourself, preventing CC, and doing the most damage all game, it seems like that's what wins solo shuffle. So you can do it, though. You can do it. And those are the PvP talents. I'll set it right back to my staple, which is Doomburst, Necrotic Wounds, and Strang. And finally, the left side of the talent tree, I'm running a more traditional setup. There is a lot of magic damage in the game. So even Mr. I hate when my teammates run out of zone is talented into that almost all the time, right? So you can see the setup with the zone as fix. You've got, of course, the double grip. I still have A-Bomb Limb because even though it's been nerfed so many times, it does a little bit of chunk damage. It gives you a ton of rune generation, and it pulls everybody in. Pulling people in, even if it's just once, is disruptive and useful. And it's very good against guiding targets, and it does do a little bit of damage. All for 1 talent point. It's annoying, but I still think it's better. And Empower Rune Weapon, while the haste is much nerfed, the rune generation is all still really good. So when you combine the two resource gen of these two talents, you're never running out. You are Coil and Clawing and Chains and Death Strike. You can do whatever you want all the time because your rune generation is so high. And these just add to it. And Icy Talents, of course, the Death Coil mod. So you really want to go down that line. Because of the Icy Talents buff. I use Lichborn Wall. I know a lot of people use Death's Reach. It's just nice having another wall, and extension of this means more Leech, because that's what Lichborn gives you, and it also gives you more immunity to Poly, gives you more immunity to various CC like Fear and Sleep. So it's just nice, but of course you can swap this out. Boop, pop. See, that's all you have to do. And now you get the long-range grip for better setups. So obviously that's what it does. And if that's what you need against a certain comp, like they're just staying 40 yards away and you just got to get that extra yard to grip them in for that really important go, feel free. But I like the Lichborn Wall, especially in solo shuffles, just for a little bit more self-sustain. Now, short IBF is controversial here. Sometimes in especially early season, you'll notice the rounds don't even last that long. Like you can just finish people, especially with your spike them. So you might actually literally have multiple rounds go by where this is a dead talent. But also it's because it's probably this. I'm going to be real with you. But I'm going to tell you the story. It's probably this. Like, I'm just going to leave this up on the screen right now. I'll probably even have this be the ones that I linked into. This is a funny story. I'll probably have this be the ones that I link to you in the description below. So when you import them in, you're going to get this, right? Short IBF. But the first solo shuffle I played, I had a Death Coil crit, Festering Wounds crit, Festering Wounds crit. It was the absolute lottery. That should almost never happen because we have no crit chance. It was literally like a 1 in 10,000, I think. It was unbelievable. And it hit for 70k plus 70k plus 160k. So 140, 300k from a single global, which is like DH level. That's a death sweep right there. But no, that's the most crazy ranged global I've ever seen in my life. And after that, I was like, oh my god, I can never swap off Merciless Strikes. Because it gives you that slight chance to do it. But realistically, this is bad. Because it's nerfed by 50%. So 2% crit chance is kind of like 1% extra dam and 1% damage from a talent versus short IBF. It's short IBF, let's be real. Even if the rounds are not lasting that long, most of them will probably get to the 2-minute mark, and then you'll have a second IBF that you wouldn't have had anyway. And IBF getting you out of stuns and giving you that wall will allow you to finish players. if you press it at like 50% and they're also at 50%, they can't peel you. They do less damage to you. You can just kind of like grind out that last win, and that's really big. So that's what I'll link to you. But I just wanted to tell you the funny story about, I was like, that's why I was even talented into it in the first place. I was like, oh wait, I should change off of Merciless Strikes. And then that game happened and I was like, I can never leave it. Okay, that's it. That's the left side. That's the right side. That's the PvP talents. That's the gear. That's absolutely everything. Generally, I do look at rotation for a bit. So let me lock that in and show you. I don't really think there's too much rotational things you need to know. But let's talk about the Doom Burst mechanic, because if anything, that's probably what people are doing wrong. Before, it used to be you want to burst all your wounds to 0 and then keep them at 0 for as long as possible. So you use as little festering strikes as possible back when Raise A-Bomb, you know, our big guy, was a thing. But now it's kind of like you want to keep them at 3 or even 5 most of the time if you're running the Coil Clawing build like I do with the extra procs and a lot of haste. Because at any moment, you want, even if they kite you, you want to be able to burst 4 wounds at a time from 2 Death Coil procs at a range and do all the damage. So your setup opener is pre-pop Army of the Dead, demount Army. You'll see so many DKs do this. It's just like demount Army in the middle of the map. Then I have Dark Transform and Empower Rune Weapon macro together. So I just throw that out there to get the Army of the Dead buff. Well, that was the 4 set back. I'm running the 2 set now, so I don't think it gives you... yeah, it does. It still does. But then you'll get rid of that eventually, and it won't even matter. But still, Dark Transform for the extra damage, Coil Clawing build, Empower Rune Weapon for the haste, and the resource gen while you're sending it, and then Unholy Assault for the extra 20% dam, APOC, and then A-Bomb Limb. And while you're feeding that all up, you might get a couple of wounds from your pet, then you press 1 Fester Strike, and you pray for a Death Coil proc that you can burst with Doom Burst. So, here's the pre-pop army. Well, I'm sure you guys have seen that out on Bug a lot, right? Here's the pre-pop army. Dark Transform, Unholy Assault, there's that proc. So then, you gotta get your diseases up, A-Bomb, and then you just need 4 wounds maybe, proc, burst them down, right? Then you wait for another proc, if you ever get one. Sometimes you get really unlucky. Oh my God, was that 190k? I don't even want to look at that, bro. This is probably the most unlucky I've gotten in a while, but that's still another Death Coil proc. I guess I'm doing 170k DPS, still looks good. That's pretty procless, actually. That's pretty sizable damage. You can see that clawing, the Frenzied mod with the Rotten Touch mod. What was that, 184k? Okay, that's probably my new max. I don't think I've ever hit anything that hard. So yeah, you can see I get another proc here. My Dark Transform comes back up. You want to pop that instantly. There's another proc. Okay, it's getting better. Death Coil proc. There's another proc because of the Dark Transform buff. There's a proc. And you can see how I'm always keeping... Oh, there's another one, Jesus. Well, not there because I was talking, but always trying to keep those wounds above 3 or just 5, depending on how many procs I have. And then when you proc, you just burst them down to 0. So yeah, that was a lot of damage. Holy cow. Yeah, so we got to show off on the second Dark Transform window. I think I got 3 or 4 procs back to back. That can just kill somebody, by the way. Even though my luck at the beginning was pretty atrocious, the second Dark Transform window gave me 3 or 4, and that just ends the game. So in 45 seconds, you have a chance to win the game. And then the Rotten Touch, Reaping, Frenzied Mod buff all came together with a crit and gave me 184k crit clawing. I don't think I've ever hit anything like that in PvP because of Verse, of course, but... Wow. I think I have hit like 150k, 160k, and that's pretty wild. So yeah, you're just bursting wounds with Death Coil now, right? And you want to keep it higher than you used to, because again, if they kite away from you, you really want to be able to use those Death Coil procs without even having to come back to them, because you could just, let's say you have 4 wounds on somebody, and they blink away. But then you get a Death Coil proc. Instead of having to reconnect to them, you can Death Coil proc, 90% slow them, 2 bursted wounds, and then claw the last 2 wounds off with the Rotten Touch buff and maybe even Reaping. And that's how you're killing people from across the map. Yes, that is how it works. So, Unholy, absolutely amazing. I think I could show the disease build because it's going to have APOC more often, but it's the exact same rotation, except you can't do the clawing version of it. You just have to keep Plaguebringer up. But you just want to keep your diseases up. You go through those same 4 setup globals, right? If you had Defile, you would put that down, and then you just Plaguebringer buff. Right, there it is. And then Coil still, when you have wounds, multiple wounds. See, this is why you don't need those short. Look at this. bursting wounds for free. But when you get the APOC up, you'll probably have that Magus damage. That's pretty nice Magus damage. Looks pretty nice. More coils, more coils, more coils. And you just keep that Plague Bringer. See, it's still got 3 seconds. Reset it. Now it's got 9 just by pressing Scourge Strike. And then in 15 seconds, you've got that APOC. So if you've had a dry spell with Death Coil procs, which is more likely now that I don't have the attack speed mod, then you just want to keep yourself at nearby. Like you can see, I'm not bursting them down to 0 because then you can just do this. Oh my god, look at that. APOC, Dream, Death Coil, burst the other 2. That was 6 wounds all bursted at once. That's pretty fun. You got your double Magus coming out, just spamming down. It's fun. It's absolutely fun. You keep that Plague Bringer buff up. So yeah, the main prios are Death Coil every time you have wounds and a proc. If you are literally 100 runic power and you got nothing else to do, you could just keep spending Death Coils after and then just go Death Coil, proc, Death Coil, proc, Death Coil, Death Coil. I mean, you're just a machine gunning Death Coil machine right now. And you keep that Plague Bringer buff up, and you burst wounds with Death Coil, and you burst wounds with APOC, and you rotate through your setup globals. And that is Unholy. You will get everything you've ever desired. Following through with this, any one of those, and I really hope that you do. Tell me in the comments if how your season's going after a while. You know, you can come back to this video in 2 weeks and tell me you got glad or whatever. You know, excited for you. Peace, and hope this helped. GG's, guys.